My name is Lena Voss. I'm 27 years old, a first lieutenant serving in the United States Army. My grandmother spent her career as an Army nurse. No awards on her record, no public mentions anywhere. She passed away living simply, the same way she'd always lived. In a modest little house on the south side of Atlanta, with a backyard vegetable patch she tended at dawn, the rich aroma of fresh brewed coffee that lingered in every room, and zero savings to speak of. At least that's what the whole family assumed was true. At Arlington National Cemetery, I stood there completely alone. No relatives showed up, no bouquets except the single one I carried. 80 gleaming white markers for nurses lined up in perfect military rows, like a silent formation that had never been given the order to stand down. Then a 4-star general approached. He shook my hand firmly and said, "Fly to Geneva. Just give them your grandmother's name. They'll know exactly what it means." They did know. And what waited for me there, a $15.2 million trust, 319 veterans whose lives had been rebuilt, and a hidden chapter of my grandmother's past that shattered. Everything my family thought they understood ripped our world apart. Before we continue, if this story hits home for you, please take a second to like and subscribe, but only if it truly resonates. Drop your city and the current local time in the comments. I read every single one. It means a lot knowing who's listening from where. Let me bring you back to that cold Tuesday morning in March, when the dogwoods were still bare and the air carried that sharp late winter bite, the exact day my grandmother passed. The call hit my phone at 5:47 a.m. I was still, in my small apartment close to Fort Belvoir, combat boots lined up by the door, dress uniform already pressed and ready. A nurse from Atlanta Medical Center spoke in that careful, practiced tone you only hear when delivering bad news. Clara Voss had slipped away overnight, peacefully, no suffering. I sat on the edge of my bed for what felt like forever. My grandmother's house on Atlanta's south side had creaky wooden floors. That same garden she worked before sunrise every single day, and the smell of her hand-brewed coffee that had soaked into the curtains for decades. The entire place was worth less than my sister's engagement ring. No one else in the family ever questioned it. I always did. She raised me repeating one simple line so often it became the heartbeat of my childhood. Resilience is grace. Lena, grace you give to your future self. That belief pushed me to enlist. It carried me through 18 brutal months in a combat zone. Patching up soldiers while incoming rounds shook the earth around us. Every stable part of who I am traces straight back to her. I called my mother first. Sarah answered on the 4th ring. "Well," she said flatly, "she had a long life. Just let me know the funeral details." No pause. No emotion. Grief treated like another item on her to-do list. Next, I tried my sister Megan, straight to voicemail. I left a message she ignored for 3 full days. That same evening, I drove to the house, used the key she'd given me at 16, and sat at her old kitchen table. I started opening drawers I'd never touched before. In the nightstand, tucked behind an old Bible and a tin of peppermints, I found a faded yellow envelope addressed in her handwriting. Arlington, Section 21. Inside lay a worn military ID card, edges cracked with age. The rank clearly read captain. She had never once mentioned she held that rank. Arlington in March feels like a place that steals your breath. Endless rows of white stones stretch under a low gray sky, frost still clinging to the grass. Section 21 is the dedicated nurses' area, graves dating back over 100 years. My grandmother had earned her spot there, and I hadn't even known her true rank. My mother skipped the service. "I have a closing this afternoon. Lena, you understand." Megan had a bridal fitting booked, and Tyler, her fiancé, claimed he couldn't move it. So it was only me, a gentle-eyed chaplain, and a 7-person honor guard. They folded the flag with razor-sharp precision that made my chest tighten. The chaplain offered a quiet prayer. 3 rifle volleys split the silence. When the guard marched away, the chaplain touched my shoulder and left. I stood alone, listening to the wind move, through bare branches. Then footsteps approached across the damp grass. A man in his 70s walked up from the east path wearing a crisp Class A uniform, brass gleaming despite the clouds, 4 stars on each shoulder. I recognized the authority instantly. He extended his hand. "Your grandmother saved more lives than most generals I've ever known," he told me, voice deep and steady. "I'm Robert Harlan. I served with Clara decades ago." He glanced at the headstone, then back at me. "Fly to Geneva. Give them her name. They'll understand." He slipped a business card into my palm and walked off before I could ask anything more. I drove back to Atlanta with that. Card on the passenger. Seat and 100 unanswered. Questions burning inside me. That night I mentioned the general to my mother. She gave a short, dismissive laugh, the kind that stings worse than cruelty. Some old man playing dress-up at a cemetery, Sarah said. Don't waste money on a trip to Europe. Lena, you're a lieutenant, not a millionaire. The way she said lieutenant made it sound like a consolation prize. I'd survived a combat deployment. I'd held a 19-year-old private's hand while he waited for medevac, bleeding out. But to her, my service was just a job without a fancy office. Megan called the next day with one question only. Did Grandma leave anything valuable in the house? I hung up, opened my laptop, and searched every military database I could access. Nurse course records, Vietnam-era logs, awards lists. Nothing beyond basic service notes appeared for Clara Voss. No citations, no special recognition, exactly as she'd always claimed. Yet a 4-star general doesn't attend a stranger's burial without a powerful reason. I dialed the number on the card. General Harlan answered on the second ring. Clara served under me in Vietnam, he said. Field hospital outside Bien Hoa, 1970. She was the finest surgical nurse I ever commanded. He paused when I asked what happened after the war. You need to see this in person, Lieutenant. Words won't do it justice. Go to Geneva. There's a foundation near Lake Geneva. Just give them her name. He wouldn't say another word. I stared at the phone long after he hung up. My grandmother would never have wanted me to ignore direct guidance from a 4-star general. I burned leave days and dipped into savings for the ticket, 9 hours from Dulles to Geneva. My mother's reaction was exactly what I expected. You're throwing away rent money on a fantasy, Sarah snapped. Your grandmother lived in a rundown shack. Lena, there's nothing waiting for you in Europe. I packed light, the yellowed envelope, the faded captain's ID, and a small leather notebook I'd found in the house filled with my grandmother's handwriting. Some pages were in a shorthand I couldn't decipher. The long flight gave me plenty of time to second-guess everything. Maybe my mother was right. Maybe the general was just being sentimental. Maybe Geneva would turn out to be an expensive dead end. The taxi finally stopped at an old stone building beside Lake Geneva. Ivy climbed the walls, classic European architecture, and a brass plaque I couldn't read from the curb. The lobby smelled of lemon polish and aged paper. A receptionist looked up. Your name? Lena Voss. A pause. Her fingers froze on the keyboard. And your grandmother? Clara Voss. Something changed in her expression. She made a quick call in French, then said, 1 moment, please. 2 minutes later, a door opened. A woman in her late 60s stepped out, silver hair, tailored gray suit, posture that spoke of decades in boardrooms. She crossed the lobby with calm, economical steps and offered her hand. Ms. Voss, we've been expecting you. She held the handshake a moment longer than usual. Your grandmother made very specific arrangements. Please come with me. I followed her down a hallway lined with framed photographs. I didn't have time to study. I already sensed that whatever waited at the end of that corridor would rewrite my entire life. Her name was Elizabeth Caldwell. 65, the trust attorney who had handled my grandmother's affairs for more than 23 years. The way she spoke about Clara, precise yet filled with deep respect, made it clear this was never an ordinary client. The conference room featured a long walnut table and tall windows looking out over the lake. Elizabeth placed a thick leather binder in front of me and opened it to the first page. 23 years ago, she began. Your grandmother created an irrevocable charitable trust through this foundation. It was seeded by royalties from a patent she co-developed, a compact tourniquet system with built-in pressure sensors that could be applied one-handed in under 10 seconds. The U.S. military adopted it after successful trials in the early 1990s. Those royalties grew quietly for 3 decades. I stared at her. The current value of the trust is $15,200,000. The room seemed to tilt. I gripped the table edge until my knuckles turned white. Elizabeth continued calmly. The trust's only mission is to deliver emergency financial help to veterans facing life-altering hardship, advanced surgeries, prosthetics the VA won't cover, burn treatments, residential mental health programs, adaptive housing, vocational retraining when injuries end careers. In 23 years, it has quietly supported 319 individuals. Every single case is documented right here. She turned the binder to page after page of records. Names shown only as initials for privacy, dates, exact amounts, and before and after photos of people I'd never met. A Marine who lost both hands now running his own auto repair business. An Army mechanic who got the spinal surgery that let her finish college. A Vietnam-era veteran whose decades-old wounds finally healed. Each file ended with the same note. Recipient reports restored dignity and independence. Your grandmother named you the sole successor trustee, Elizabeth said. Only you will manage the trust from now on. Why me? She reached into the binder and pulled out a sealed envelope with my name written in. Clara's familiar handwriting. She left this for you specifically. She excluded every other family member from any involvement whatsoever. Elizabeth looked me straight in the eye. Her instructions were crystal clear, Lieutenant. I held the envelope and felt the weight of $15 million. I never knew existed pressing against my ribs like extra body armor. I read the letter alone later that night in my hotel room overlooking the lake. The paper was simple. The same plain stationery she used for grocery lists and birthday cards. Nothing fancy. Pure Clara Voss. Her handwriting was firm and steady, written years earlier when her hands were still strong. Lena, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and you've met Elizabeth. I'm sorry I never told you. I never told anyone. Here's why. Every single dollar I kept for myself would have been a dollar taken from someone who needed it more. I watched 18 and 19-year-olds lose legs. Faces and futures in wars the world stopped noticing. The VA did what it could, but it was never enough. So I built something that actually could help. Your mother will want this money. Your sister will want this money. They'll claim I was confused, selfish, or that blood should come first. Don't listen. Blood mattered to me too, but some debts can't be paid with cash. They're paid with resilience. I chose you because you're the only one who truly gets that. You joined the Army when everyone said it was beneath you. You chose the hard road every single time. You've stitched soldiers back together under fire. That's all I needed to know. Protect this trust. Never let anyone twist it into something that serves pride instead of real need. Resilience is grace, Lena. Grace to your future self. I love you. Now go do the work. Grandma! I read it 3 times and cried twice. Then I folded it carefully, splashed cold water on my face, and called Elizabeth. I'm honoring every word she wrote, I told her. I expected nothing less, she replied. Before I could end the call, my phone buzzed with a text from Megan. Mom says you flew to Europe. Have you lost your mind? We need to talk about Grandma's house right now. The battle had already begun. I landed back at Dulles late Thursday evening. My mother was waiting in the lobby of my apartment building. She'd driven 4 hours from Atlanta, which meant she already knew far more than she should. Geneva, Sarah said, arms folded tight. I found your flight confirmation. You left your email open on the family iPad, a mistake I would never make again. We sat at my kitchen table. I gave her the basic facts, the trust, the foundation, my role as successor trustee. I kept the letter private. Some things are meant only for the person they were written to. Sarah listened with the same calculating stillness she used when sizing up a real estate deal she planned to dominate. How much? She asked. $15,200,000. Her eyes sharpened like a predator adjusting its focus. That money belongs to this family, she stated. She was my mother. It's an irrevocable charitable trust. Mom, it exists to help veterans rebuild after catastrophic injuries. It's not family money. You're telling me my own mother sat on $15 million while we lived in that leaking 2-bedroom house? She gave it to people who lost limbs and futures serving this country. Sarah stood abruptly, chair scraping the floor. I spent my childhood embarrassed, Lena. I lied about our address. I wore the same 3 outfits to school because my mother, who was apparently rich, chose to live poor. And now you're going to tell me we don't get any of it? I'm telling you it's not legally ours, and it's not morally ours either. Her jaw locked. The look on her face wasn't grief or rage. It was pure strategy. I'll hire a lawyer, she said quietly. We'll see how unbreakable this trust really is. She grabbed her purse and left. The door didn't slam. Sarah never slammed doors. She closed them with a finality that made the entire hallway feel 10 degrees colder. Megan called the next morning. Voice syrupy sweet at first, the way she always started when she wanted something. Lena, I'm so happy for you. Grandma must have trusted you completely. I waited. So, about the wedding, she continued. There it was. Megan had reserved the Chateau Elan winery and resort for September. $55,000 already paid. Another $165,000 still owed. A $220,000 wedding for a couple still paying off loans and a new SUV. Just a tiny slice of the trust could handle it, she said. Grandma would have wanted her granddaughter to have the perfect day, right? Grandma wanted that money to restore veterans' lives. That's exactly what it's doing. The sweetness vanished. You've always acted superior because you spent time in that creaky old house with her, playing soldier, playing hero, playing martyr. This is a family issue, Lena. Playing soldier? I deployed to a combat zone. Megan, I held kids' hands while they bled out waiting for evacuation. And now you're hoarding $15 million that should belong to us. I ended the call. Inside 48 hours, the family campaign kicked into high gear. Sarah contacted every aunt, uncle, and cousin she could reach. Her version spread through group chats like wildfire. Lena is hoarding Clara's fortune. She refuses to share even a penny with her own mother and sister. No mention of veterans. No mention that the trust was irrevocable. No mention of Grandma's explicit wishes. Just a 27-year-old lieutenant too selfish to help her own blood. I called General Harlan that same evening and told him everything. I've watched families destroy themselves over far smaller amounts, he said, voice steady with decades of command experience. Document every conversation, dates, times, exact wording, and never meet them alone. I thanked him and sat in the quiet of my apartment realizing I was heading into a war with no uniform, no chain of command, and no clear rules. 2 weeks after my return from Geneva, my mother organized what she called a family dinner. It was an ambush. The setting was Sarah's dining room in Atlanta. Attendees, Sarah, Megan, Tyler, my Aunt Carla, and Uncle Dale, who mostly poked at his plate. Sarah had prepared actual index cards. Clara was clearly not of sound mind in her final years, she began. She couldn't possibly have set up a trust this large. We suspect the documents are questionable. Aunt Carla nodded right on cue. Mom always said Clara was eccentric. I let them finish their prepared statements. Then I spoke calmly. Grandma created the trust 23 years ago when she was 59. Her physicians confirmed full mental capacity. The trust is reviewed every year by a licensed Swiss attorney and meets both Swiss law and U.S. tax requirements. It is unbreakable. Sarah's cards trembled slightly in her hands. You're only 27, she said. A first lieutenant on base pay. You really believe you can handle $15 million? I'm not handling the money, Mom. I'm guarding its purpose. There's a difference. That purpose should be this family. That purpose is 319 veterans who had no one else left. The room fell silent. Tyler leaned toward Megan and whispered, thinking. I couldn't hear. Don't worry. My firm has top estate lawyers. We'll find an opening. I heard every syllable. I stood, folded my napkin exactly as military training taught, and placed it beside my plate. I love this family, I told them. But I will never apologize for carrying out my grandmother's final wishes, and I will not pretend that funding a luxury, wedding, or bigger real estate commissions is the same as doing what's right. I walked out. No one followed me to the door, but I knew the real fight was just beginning. The next few days felt like walking through a minefield with no map. Sarah found a more aggressive attorney, someone who specialized in creative estate challenges rather than cautious advice. They filed a petition in a Virginia probate court claiming Clara suffered from undue influence and diminished capacity in her later years. The filing was thin, mostly affidavits from family members saying she'd become eccentric and forgetful. No medical records, no expert testimony, just emotion dressed up as evidence. Elizabeth Caldwell emailed me the moment the documents hit the docket. Let them file, she wrote. The trust corpus is domiciled in Switzerland. Virginia has zero jurisdiction. The case will be dismissed within weeks. And they'll be ordered to pay our legal fees. Under the no contest clause, your grandmother included. I've already drafted the motion to dismiss. Stay calm. I printed the 4-page legal summary she attached. Calm. Ironclad language that read like reinforced concrete, and kept it in my go bag. Meanwhile, the family narrative kept spreading. Sarah posted carefully worded updates on Facebook without ever naming me directly. When you lose your mother and then learn the money she saved was being kept from her own children by someone who claims higher purpose, it breaks your heart. Prayers appreciated. Aunt Carla commented, some people get brainwashed by institutions and forget blood is thicker than any uniform. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in a decade started texting variations of the same message. Can't you just help your mom and Megan out a little? Family should come first. I didn't reply. I went to PT, showed up for staff meetings, kept my performance evals spotless, but the whispers followed me even on base. A sergeant in logistics pulled me aside one morning. "Mercer, saw something about your family on Facebook. You good?" I gave the short version. My grandmother left money for wounded vets. Some people don't like that choice. He nodded slowly. Sounds like she was a real one. Hang in there. That same week, a reporter from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution emailed me. Subject line: Inquiry regarding charitable trust established by Clara Voss. Tyler's connections, no doubt. They wanted comment on allegations of family exclusion from rightful inheritance. I forwarded it to Elizabeth and General Harlan. Harlan called me back within the hour. "Your mother invited the press to your sister's engagement party," he said. "She's planning to make a public statement. She wants an audience when she accuses you." I exhaled. I figured, if she fires the first shot in public, you have my permission to return fire. With facts only. I'll be there. So will several others who owe your grandmother everything. Sir, I don't want to ruin Megan's night. It stopped being her night the moment your mother turned it into a stage. You show up in uniform, stay professional, let the truth speak. If they don't attack, we're just guests. If they do, we answer. I agreed. I called Tom Brennan next. He answered on the first ring. "Lieutenant Voss, heard from the general. We're coming. Me and 4 others your grandmother helped. Dress clothes, medals, the whole deal. We'll be there at 1800 sharp." Hearing his voice, steady, grateful, unbreakable, made my shoulders drop for the first time in days. 3 days before the party, Megan asked me to meet her for coffee. Just as sisters. Neutral spot in Buckhead. She started with tears. Real ones, I think. Megan could cry on cue, but these looked painful. "This wedding is everything I've ever pictured," she said. "Mom and I are underwater. Tyler's parents backed out on half the deposit. The venue wants the balance by Thursday. I'm not asking you to empty the trust, Lena, just enough to save the day. Grandma would have wanted me happy." I looked at her across the table. "When did you last visit Grandma?" She blinked. I was swamped with planning. She was in the hospital 3 weeks before she died. You didn't come once. I was busy. She was dying. Megan's tears stopped like someone flipped a switch. She was old. Lena? She lived in a falling-down house and smelled like burnt coffee. But apparently she was sitting on millions and you're guarding it like it's yours. There she was, the real Megan, underneath the mascara and the Sister Act. That money gave 319 veterans a second chance, I said quietly. Your wedding budget wouldn't have saved even one. She leaned forward. Mom already forwarded your email threads with the Swiss lawyer to the reporter. She got them off the old iPad. Technically, it was still hers. I stared at her. You're admitting she went into my private legal correspondence? Megan shrugged. You left it logged in. I stood up. Thank you for the warning. Megan, $15 million. Every cent of it goes where Grandma intended. To people who sacrificed more than any of us ever will. I left the coffee untouched and walked out. The night before the party, I went back to Grandma's house one last time. The key still worked. The air inside smelled faintly of coffee grounds and lavender sachets. I sat at her kitchen table. Same spot where she'd taught me how to tie a perfect square knot, how to check for a pulse under fire, how to keep breathing when everything hurt. I opened her leather notebook. Page after page of neat handwriting, initials, dates, amounts, outcomes. TB, bilateral prosthetics. 2005, 40,800. Now owns carpentry business, employs 4 vets. So, mortgage rescue, 2012, $24,300. Kept family home. DR, Children's Education Fund, 2018, $38,000. Both kids graduated debt-free. 319 entries, 319 second chances. I pressed the notebook to my chest and closed my eyes. My phone lit up. General Harlan. We'll be there 1800. Dress blues. Tom's bringing the team. Another text from Tom. Boys are ready. Not missing this. You're not alone tomorrow. Then an email from Sarah, copied to Megan, Tyler, Carla, the whole extended list. Tomorrow I set the record straight in front of family and friends. You had every chance to do right by us, Lena. This ends one way or the other. I turned the phone face down, looked around the dim kitchen, the garden visible through the window, still bare, still waiting for spring. This house appraised at maybe $95,000. The woman who lived here gave away $15 million in silence. and the family that barely visited her now demanded every cent. I slept in her bed that night. The pillow still carried the faintest trace of her lavender scent. In the morning, I pressed my Class A uniform, packed Grandma's notebook in my messenger bag, and drove to Chateau Elan. The venue was beautiful. Rolling hills, white columns, dogwoods just starting to bud. 6:45 p.m. Saturday, over 80. Guests already mingling in the ballroom. Crystal chandeliers, gold-rimmed plates, champagne flutes catching the light. A string quartet played something soft and elegant. Sarah moved through the crowd like a campaign manager. Sequined dress, fresh highlights, touching elbows, laughing at the right moments. Megan stood beside Tyler near the sweetheart table, glowing in a way that looked exhausting to maintain. I walked in wearing my dress greens, ribbons on the left, jump wings above them. Not a statement. I'd come straight from a change of command ceremony on base. But the uniform shifted the air in the room anyway. Sarah saw me immediately. Her smile froze at the edges. "You actually showed up," she said, bold. I nodded politely and took a seat near the back. 7 minutes later, a server approached. "Ma'am, there are several military gentlemen at the garden entrance asking for you." I followed her outside. General Robert Harlan stood there in full dress blues, 4 stars shining under the string lights. Beside him, Tom Brennan in a dark suit, standing tall on his prosthetics. 4 other veterans, 2 in suits with medals pinned, 2 in crisp veteran formal wear. "Evening, Lieutenant," Harlan said. "Evening, sir." "They're with me," I told the staff member. She nodded quickly and led them inside. A 4-star general entering a ballroom has the gravity of a planet. Heads turned. Conversations dropped. Sarah's face tightened. The reporter, now confirmed as Charlotte Hayes from the AJC, sat near the bar, pen already moving. Toast started at 7:20. Tyler's father gave a warm 3-minute welcome. Tyler followed, charming, practiced. Then Sarah took the microphone. She began gently. "Thank you all for being here to celebrate. Megan and Tyler, family is everything." Glasses raised. Then the pivot. "But I need to be honest about something painful." Her voice rose, practiced emotion cracking through. "After my mother, Clara, passed, we discovered she had left behind a very large sum. $15 million. My daughter, Lena, has chosen to keep every penny from her own mother and sister, on a night that should be about love and joy." She turned toward me. 80 pairs of eyes followed. "Is that what family means to some people?" Murmurs rolled through the room. Megan stood beside her, chin high. Tyler whispered to someone at the bar. Charlotte Hayes wrote faster. Sarah set the mic down and looked at me, waiting for tears, apology, collapse. I stood. 3 seconds of absolute silence. Then I walked to the microphone. No rush, no raised voice. The uniform and the quiet did the work. My grandmother, Clara Voss, was a captain in the United States Army Nurse Corps. The words landed like a gavel. She served at the Bien Hoa Field Hospital in Plymouth, 1970. She operated through mortar barrages, triaged 14 severely wounded soldiers in one 4-hour hellstorm while shrapnel tore through her own shoulder. She never stopped working. She refused the Purple Heart, her exact words: "Medals don't close wounds. Hands do." No one breathed. After Vietnam, she co-invented a one-handed tourniquet system with real-time pressure feedback. The military adopted it in the 1990s, royalties. From that patent funded an irrevocable charitable trust. Current value, $15,200,000. I looked straight at Sarah. That trust has one purpose: to help combat veterans facing catastrophic hardship when the system falls short. In 23 years, it has quietly rebuilt 319 lives. Prosthetics, surgeries, homes saved, children put through college, PTSD treatment that kept people alive. I paused. I didn't withhold anything from my family. My grandmother chose, deliberately, to give it to people who had already given everything. The silence was thick, battlefield quiet. I have people here who can tell you what that money actually meant. I turned toward the side wall. "General Harlan?" A 4-star general rose, and the room understood the ground had just shifted. Robert Harlan walked forward with parade ground precision. "I served 39 years, he began. Led divisions into combat, planned operations you saw on the news. But the single bravest human being I ever knew was a 5'2" nurse named Clara Voss." He told the Bien Hoa story, the mortar night, the shoulder wound she bandaged herself, the 14 soldiers she kept breathing until dust-off arrived. She turned down every medal I tried to push through, he said. Said the soldiers were the ones who bled. He stepped aside. Tom Brennan stood next. Everyone saw the prosthetics below his suit pants. Tom Brennan. Clara's trust paid for these legs when the VA couldn't. I own a custom woodworking shop now. 4 employees. 3 are veterans. She visited every year, brought peach cobbler, never asked for thanks. Another man rose. David Wren. She funded my kids' college when I couldn't work after back-to-back deployments. A third, Paul Hessler. Mortgage payment when I faced medical discharge. She kept my family off the street. A fourth, Marcus Cole. Paid for my residential PTSD program. I'm still here because of her. One by one, 5 veterans stood. 5 lives. 5 debts repaid in gratitude. A woman at a front table started clapping. Tentative at first. Then a table near the windows. Then the whole room. Deep, chest-rattling applause that rolled like thunder. Sarah stood frozen, hands gripping the table edge. Megan's face drained of color. Tyler slipped toward the exit, phone already out. Charlotte Hayes closed her notebook and just watched. I stayed at the microphone until the clapping died. 5 men who had lost pieces of themselves stood up for my grandmother while her own daughter and granddaughter could not meet anyone's eyes. That's when I knew the war was over. Not because they surrendered, but because the truth finally had a louder voice. I'll tell you how it ended. The lawyers, the headlines, the quiet that followed. But first, if this story moved you, hit that subscribe button. Not for me, for every person who's ever protected something bigger than family approval. And if you've ever been the one who did the hard, right thing when everyone called you selfish, drop your story in the comments. I read them all.